have young white people who are getting more and more mad. I'm just telling you the truth.
What they mad?
And they have the guts. They're mad because this thing. Here's why. Here's why. They go, look, I'm 12 times more likely to be killed by a black person than you are a white person. And you go, well, that doesn't count. They go, look, my dad's business got burned down.
Yeah.
My city got burned down. I've been accused of being a racist, even though I'm not. And I'm looking at this right now, and I'm not allowed to have an opinion. And I can't go into certain neighborhoods because I get my ass kicked. And then you just say, yeah, but you've had systemic power. That is a surefire way to breed racism. You have young white people who are getting more and more mad. I'm just telling you the truth.
What they mad?
And they have the guts. They're mad because this thing. Here's why. Here's why. They go, look, I'm 12 times more likely to be killed by a black person than you are a white person. And you go, well, that doesn't count. They go, look, my dad's business got burned down.
Yeah.
My city got burned down. I've been accused of being a racist, even though I'm not. And I'm looking at this right now, and I'm not allowed to have an opinion. And I can't go into certain neighborhoods because I get my ass kicked. And then you just say, yeah, but you've had systemic power. That is a surefire way to breed racism.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Global Views with Josh, the channel where we don't just watch the news, we peel it apart, season it with a little truth, and sprinkle on some sarcasm, and serve it hot. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and hit on that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive that actually says what everyone else is afraid to say. Now, apparently, the latest national emergency is not inflation, not healthcare, not housing. No, not all that. It's that some white Americans are suddenly furious that black people are no longer giving them the emotional attention, validation, and applause that they used to expect. Yes, you heard that right. America is having a meltdown because black folks have minded their business. So let's get into it.
We really got to see how things happened in the past in American history to black people when white people get angry at something that they don't have answers for. So let me tell you, you know what I'm talking about. So in a almost all white state of Utah, in an all white college, at an all white rally, one white man killed another white man. And there were two big responses to that. One response for people on the left, Democrats, in the whole spectrum, right? Conservative, centrist, leftist, far left Democrat. The white people who inherit those spaces have been lauding Charlie Kirk for days now, have been praising him, and some have been online crying, and none have mentioned his abject, disgusting racism, his attacks on black women, on black intelligence, on black professionals, his attacks on the transgender and gay community, his attacks on immigrants, and his desire for public executions, and his vitriol about Dr. Martin Luther King, his talk about George Floyd, just disgusting racism. And this is from the left praising him. And then from the right, blaming, from the president to that googly FBI guy, blaming Antifa, blaming transgender people, calling people on the left scum and degenerates when they didn't even know who did it. And then went further. We had to, but something like 20 historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, had to be shut down because of credible domestic terrorism threats. And then you have all these people online making videos and comments to black people and videos about black people threatening our lives. And why I say this is an example of America's history, because when a white person dies, particularly, but not exclusively, a white male, and white people don't have an answer for it, the immediate response in American history is to start blaming and attacking and killing black people. That's why our towns, hundreds of towns, not just Tulsa, Black Wall Street, hundreds of towns across the South and Midwest have been burned down because of white fury, like we saw these past couple of days. And not just business districts and businesses, but churches, Christian churches, bombed and destroyed by white Christians. Our homes, and of course our people, in the form of public executions and lynchings, thousands, all because white people need an outlet for their anger, their misplaced anger. And that anger has too often been directed at black people. And you saw it live and in action these past couple of days. And what's Trump's response to that guy getting caught? He's sending the military to Memphis.
I'm going to say this one time. You bigots need to leave black on black crime out of your mouths. Running around every opportunity that you get to spew out nonsense on anybody that dares to speak out about bigotry and racism amongst the white community. If you think about it, it's a little bit hypocritical, because while you're over there talking about black individuals, we should worry about our own before we worry about the white community. You're over here not worried about the crime rates amongst whites, and especially the alarming one against children. You make every other group look non-existent compared to the numbers that you guys are cranking out. And you have the audacity to sit here and worry about black on black crime before you're worried about your own? Make it make sense.
Y'all have heard of the Colfax Massacre. Colfax Massacre took place in 1873 in Colfax, Louisiana. An angry mob of more than 300 white men and women stormed Colfax, Louisiana, killing any black person they saw. The goal was to rid their towns of any of the newly freed black people because they just didn't want to live beside them. More than 100 black men, women, and children were killed, and many businesses and homes were burned down. And to be honest, it was effective. Many black people in neighboring cities, one being Pollock, Louisiana, started to move north and west to find sanctum. It wasn't the first time something like this happened, and it isn't the last. Massacres of black and brown people to either build lakes, build parks, or just because white people didn't want them there, happened for at least the next 90 to 100 years. Let me know if y'all want more of these, because there's at least 60 other instances.
White people, if crime statistics really mattered to us, we would be talking about white men every damn day. We as white people love to throw around statistics when it comes to the black community. We love to misconstrue data about poverty rates, crime rates, single parent households. Here's the thing, if you really want to talk about problematic behavior in terms of statistics, we need to talk about white men. Most mass shootings in America, white men. School shootings, white men. Intimate partner violence, typically known as domestic violence, white men. Police brutality and systemic violence, white men. Online harassment and extremism, white men. Domestic terrorism, white men. Serial killers, white men. The demographic making up the vast majority of CEOs, judges, senators, and police chiefs who refuse to hold white men responsible, white men. And yet us white men are really talked about as being a problem. Few white people are asking what's wrong with white men, what's wrong with the culture. Few white men are demanding that we be fixed. And why? Because we as white men humanize and individualize white violent offenders. And it's time to flip the script. To shame and blame, because I know white males are incredibly fragile when it comes to that, but instead to name what's really going on and who continues to be protected and not held accountable because of selective storytelling. I hope this helps.
Been, quote, Bedford-Stuyvesant in my time. But I would like to say what scares us is I think we hear violence.
The young lady said she's afraid of violence. And isn't it sad that we who have been the victims of so much violence, now whites fear violence from us? We do not have a history of killing white people. White people have a history of killing us. See? And what you fear, may I say this, sir? What you fear, and it's a deep guilt thing that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind, and that is not necessarily the mind of black people.
The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite, looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war. Right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I got to charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens when you go out on strike? Who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer. Telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric. Telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
Every time black Americans take a step forward in this country, white supremacists throw a tantrum. We call it progress. They call it a threat. And every era of advancement, every hard-won inch toward equality has been met with a violent wave of backlash. So, let's talk about it. Donald Trump recently reposted a meme on Truth Social blaming Barack and Michelle Obama for worsening racism, saying they set America back 100 years. This, coming from a man whose entire public life has been steeped in racism, from refusing to rent apartments to black tenants in the 1970s, to calling for the death penalty for the Central Park Five, black and brown teenage boys at the time, even after they were proven innocent, to spreading the racist birther lie that President Obama wasn't born in America. And now, in 2025, he's just proving that the playbook never changed, only the players did. When enslaved people were freed, what came next? Reconstruction. Black men winning elections, opening schools, building communities. And after that, the Ku Klux Klan, voter suppression, lynching campaigns, and the violent overthrow of black-led governments across the South. Progress met with terror. I did make a video on Reconstruction a while back, so go check it out. When black veterans came home from World War I in uniform, having fought for democracy abroad, white mobs murdered them for daring to expect democracy at home. That became known as the Red Summer of 1919. In one of the most haunting examples, a black soldier named Wilbur Little was lynched in Georgia for refusing to take off his army uniform after stepping off the train that brought him home from war. He had risked his life for a country that still refused to see him as a man. And he wasn't the only one. Across the nation, white mobs attacked black veterans simply for wearing their uniforms in public, because those uniforms symbolized equality. And then there's Tulsa. When black prosperity blossomed in Tulsa's Greenwood district, a thriving neighborhood known as Black Wall Street, the backlash was swift and brutal. Greenwood wasn't just wealthy, it was successful on its own terms. Black doctors, lawyers, barbershops, grocery stores, newspapers, tailors, hotels, and a fully functioning economy built by black families who were shut out of white society. Some residents were millionaires in today's dollars, all of it built just 50 years after slavery was abolished. Proof that black excellence could flourish when given even a sliver of space. And that's exactly why white supremacists burned it all down. In 1921, after a false accusation against a black teenager, white mobs, many deputized by local police, stormed Greenwood. They looted homes, they set businesses on fire. Eyewitnesses reported private planes dropping incendiary bombs. Black residents were shot in the street or dragged from their homes. By the time it ended, over 35 square blocks were destroyed. Up to 300 black men, women, and children were killed. More than 10,000 black residents were left homeless overnight. And not a single white rioter was ever held accountable. Greenwood wasn't destroyed because of crime or chaos or uprisings. It was destroyed because white supremacists couldn't tolerate the sight of black wealth, black self-sufficiency, and black dignity thriving without white control. That's the pattern, And you see it again in the 1960s. After the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act finally outlawed segregation and protected black voting rights in 1965, white politicians had a problem. They could no longer legally defend segregation. They could no longer say, we don't want black people in our schools, or we don't want black people voting. So they rebranded their racism with new language. They called it law and order. Law and order wasn't about crime. It was a political weapon designed to frame black Americans as dangerous, disruptive, and undeserving without ever mentioning race. Barry Goldwater hinted at it in 1964. Richard Nixon perfected it in 1968. His advisors admitted on tape that law and order was designed to attract racist voters without sounding racist. And the policy fallout was devastating. Mass incarceration, the war on drugs, over-policing black neighborhoods, mandatory minimums, stop and frisk, all justified by coded language white voters found comforting. Ronald Reagan doubled down with states' rights and the racist welfare queen myth. Bill Clinton expanded the prison industrial complex even further. And Donald Trump wrapped it all in Make America Great Again, a slogan rooted in turning back the clock on civil rights. Same playbook, same backlash, same message. Black progress is the threat. White grievance is the answer. So when Trump reposts a meme claiming the Obamas made racism worse, understand what he's really saying. That the sight of a black family in the White House, educated, poised, and powerful, was unbearable for people whose identity depends on feeling superior. Obama didn't make America racist. He revealed how deeply racism still runs. Trump is the backlash to it, the embodiment of everything this country refuses to face about itself. This is unfinished history. The same forces that once burned Greenwood, that fought to keep schools segregated, that silenced civil rights leaders, they never disappeared. They just put on suits and ran for office. If we want this cycle to end, white Americans have to stop pretending racism lives in the past. We have to face it in our laws, in our classrooms, in our neighborhoods, and in ourselves. Because silence is what keeps the system alive, and now is not the time for silence. Black Americans shouldn't have to prove their humanity again and again, while those who spread hate are rewarded with power. And yet here we are, a nation still built on denial, still terrified of accountability, still repeating the same cycle because too many white Americans would rather cling to denial than face the truth. But history doesn't move on its own. We do. So the question isn't whether the backlash will fade. It's whether we'll finally have the courage to end it, to confront what's right in front of us, to make sure this time progress doesn't have to start over again. If you'd like to support my work, there's a tip jar in my bio. I truly appreciate it.
Hey TikTok, how you doing? I came on here because I wanted to go ahead and answer a lot of people's questions. They said, why is the white man so angry? And to explain it, I have to go back in history, okay? So I'm gonna go back way back. First of all, I want to talk about the origin of white people. See, white people origin only goes back 6,000 years. They tell you all the time, oh no, we was here at the beginning of time. No, one of the babies that they first had came out. No. Their origin, if you don't believe me, Google it. They only go back 6,000 years. Us black people, we go back 300,000 years. That's why when the pyramids was built, there's no way that they were nowhere around at that time. They weren't even thought of when the pyramid was built. They talking about, no, the high grist on the wall. They show, no, they were lighter complected, but they were not black. I mean, they were not white people. There was no such thing as white people. It might have been lighter complected, but no, they were not. And they were not Arabic. They were none of that. They were black people. Clear black people. That's what they were. So I'm gonna bring it up to their time, their golden years, which was somewhere around the 14th century, when they decided to take over the world and they colonized. They went out through the world, robbing, stealing, and privileging through the world. They decided to, the Roman Catholic Church decided to take the Bible and rewrite it. They changed Jesus to white. They took out books of the Bible. They anything that referred to black people, they took that out. Anything referring to you finding Jesus and having the church in your spirituality within you and not the church, they took all that out. You finding God for yourself, they took all that out because they wanted you to go through the church. They wanted you to go through man to get your salvation. So they took all that out. So moving forward, they also found out Deuteronomy. They decided to say, hey, look, this 400-year curse, we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to go and live out and do God's work. We're going to enslave these black people. They went to Africa. They went and found the Hebrew people because, see, Jesus Christ, he was a Jewish man, but he also was a Hebrew, and they failed to talk about that. That was important because if you talk about what it is to be Hebrew talks about the bloodline of Christ. So Jacob, you go down to David, you go all the way back. It talks about his lineage, how he became, how each one of them, brought him down to Abraham. All of them brought his lineage, brought them, and they all said, we come to prepare for the one, which was Jesus. That's his, Hebrew was his lineage. He came from Jacob, the tribe of Jacob, which was Jewish, but his lineage was Hebrew. The reason why they don't talk about that, because the Hebrew lineage was all black. That's why they don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because it will clearly describe who he was. He was a black man. So, with that being said, moving forward, they know that the 400-year curse that they put, because once they decided that they was going to go for the Hebrew people, which was his lineage, they put us in chains, which put us in bondage, in slavery, not only with black people in America, the ones that was left in Africa, they privileged through them, they put them in pretty much slavery, economic slavery, for almost 400 years. They're now just pulling out of economic slavery. And so now we all are rising up together. So the prophecy have been fulfilled. I mean, I'm having trouble this morning, but now fulfilled. Now we all coming up together, and white folks are scared. They like, what the hell? We don't have the numbers to keep these people down. Worldwide black people, and we represent 2 billion with a B, 2 billion people worldwide. You want to know how much million people white people represent? It's only 740 million of them. In the United States, they keep telling us, oh, it's only 14% of y'all. That's it. But they keep redrawing the maps all the time. They keep trying to hold us down. They keep trying to do something with the voting laws. They keep trying to do something with that. They're lying to us. I'm telling you, my people, the best decision that y'all made was to sit down and say, let's stand down and let God do the work. Let him do the work. He's been doing it. We haven't done a thing. And these people are straight up 100% batshit crazy. And we haven't not shot not one person, not one punch. We haven't done anything. And they are losing their minds. So people, stay prayed up and keep doing what you're doing, because hey, obviously you're doing the right thing. Take it easy, my people.
So across social media and comment sections, you see a strange pattern. Anytime black success, joy, or independence trends, a certain group gets louder, angrier, and deeply confused, like they just woke up in a group project and realized the people doing all the work decided to take their talents elsewhere. And that brings us to the big question of the day. Why are some white Americans so unnecessarily angry at black people's success? Why does the sight of a black people thriving, growing, and focusing on themselves suddenly feel like some kind of national betrayal? It's almost as if some people thought attention was their birthright. Now, the moment black communities started saying things like, actually, we are prioritizing ourselves, alarms went off, code red, emotional DEFCON 1. How dare you stop centering us? Now, here's the sarcastic truth. Maybe they were expecting a thank you card for centuries of inequality, or a loyal subscription service for being the main character of American life. Who knows? Now, to be clear, we are not talking about all white Americans. We are talking about those specific individuals, the ones who, for some reason, mistake equality for revenge and black independence for hostility. Now, the ones who see someone else winning and immediately assume they are losing. The ones who think the world is a zero-sum game when really black success isn't taking anything from them except maybe their illusion of being the default center of everything. But let's not ignore the deeper issue here. A lot of these outrages rooted in fear, real fear. Fear that if black people rise without depending on white approval, the balance of power shifts. Fear that if black achievement keeps expanding, old systems don't look so permanent anymore. Now, fear that if black folks finally stop caring about being liked or accepted, the old rules, the unspoken rules collapse. And the biggest fear of all, fear of payback. Fear that black Americans might return the favor, though no one can really explain what that means, considering black communities are usually the ones asking for rights, not revenge. But the imagination is a powerful thing, especially when guilt likes to whisper in the background. Now, here's the funny thing. The majority of black people are not thinking about vengeance. They are thinking about progress, stability, opportunity, and building generational wealth. Things every community runs. But some folks are convinced that equality is secretly a trapdoor that drops them into the basement, as if justice comes with a refund request. And so we arrive at this bizarre cultural moment where black independence, emotional, social, and economic, is treated like a threat, where black joy without white validation is somehow suspicious, where black success becomes a crisis because it wasn't supervised or approved by the right people. But here is the truth that might sting. The days when black communities needed outside approval to move, speak, dream, or thrive are gone. The days when attention flowed only in one direction, gone. The days when silence was the cost of survival, absolutely gone. And that makes some people uncomfortable. But discomfort has never been a good reason to stop progress. If anything, it's a sign we are moving in the right direction. So here's the takeaway for today. America isn't falling apart because black people stopped giving attention. America is being forced to confront old habits, old expectations, and old power dynamics that no longer fit the present day. It's not a crisis, it's a recalibration. Now, as we wrap up, if your identity depends on another community catering for you, then maybe the problem isn't their independence. Maybe the problem is your dependence. And now I'll leave you with some questions that matter. Why do you think some people interpret black success as a threat instead of a win for everyone? Do you believe America is uncomfortable with equality when it's no longer theoretically but visible? And what does it say about our society when someone's confidence is seen as an attack? So drop your thoughts on the comment section. You already know I read them all. And thanks for watching Global Views with Josh. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. I'll see you guys on the next video. And until then, credit belongs to original creators.